What if the reason your energy collapses by midday, the reason you reach for your third cup of coffee before noon, the reason you feel like a completely different and far less capable version of yourself by 3 p.m. is not stress, not age, and not how hard you are working? What if it is something far more sinister? A silent hormonal sabotage that begins the moment you open your eyes every morning. And most men are triggering it themselves without ever knowing, because here's what the research is now revealing. And this goes far beyond anything you have heard about morning routines. Every single habit you practice in the first 60 minutes after waking triggers a biological cascade that either floods your body with testosterone, cortisol-crushing energy, and razor-sharp focus, or quietly dismantles every hormonal system you have before you even walk out the door. And the men who never figure this out spend years chasing the right diet, the right supplement, the right workout, while the real answer has been waiting for them every single morning in the first hour they throw away. Today, I'm going to show you the 5 specific morning habits that work directly with your hormonal biology to produce the kind of energy that does not crash, does not fade, and does not require 3 cups of coffee to fake. Stay with me. Habit number 3 is the one that has shocked every man who has tried it. But before we get into all of that, I want you to hold on to one question, because the answer is going to hit you hard at the end of this video. Here it is. If your first 60 minutes every morning are either building your testosterone or destroying it, which one do you think your morning has been doing to you all this time? I'm Dr. Christine Rodriguez, and this is Men's Vitality Hub. This channel exists to give men like you authentic, valid knowledge about your health, not recycled wellness advice dressed up in new packaging, but real biology, explained clearly, so you can make decisions that actually change how you feel every single day. That is what we are here for. So let's get into it. Here is exactly what this video is going to give you. Because I want you here for every single habit, and I promise the depth of what we cover goes far beyond what you have seen on this topic before. First, I am going to explain the biology of morning energy. What is actually happening in your hormonal system in the first hour of your day, and why it determines so much of what follows. Then I am going to walk you through each of the 5 habits in detail, the science behind them, the specific benefits each one produces, and exactly how to implement them. Then, for each habit, I will be honest about the potential downsides and mistakes men make, because done wrong, some of these habits can actually work against your energy. Then I will show you how to prevent those mistakes. Then I will tell you which men need to approach certain habits with extra care. And finally, I will give you the complete step-by-step morning protocol, a precise, practical, ready-to-implement routine that takes everything we discuss and turns it into a morning that transforms your energy. Stay for all of it. Let's start with the biology. Because without understanding what is happening in your body in the morning, the habits are just habits. With the biology, they become tools. The first hour after waking is one of the most hormonally active periods of your entire day. Cortisol, your primary alertness and energy hormone, follows a natural daily rhythm, and its single highest peak occurs in the 30 to 45 minutes after waking. This is called the cortisol awakening response, or CAR. In a healthy hormonal system, this morning cortisol spike is not a stress response. It is a biological ignition signal. It mobilizes glucose for energy, activates the immune system, sharpens cognitive focus, and prepares every major system in the body for the demands of the day ahead. Simultaneously, testosterone, which has been produced during deep sleep and reaches its daily peak in the early morning hours, is at its highest concentration of the day. The first hour after waking is the window when testosterone is most available, most bioactive, and most ready to drive the energy, motivation, and physical performance that define how a man feels and functions. The problem is this: most men spend this critical hormonal window in ways that actively suppress both the cortisol awakening response and the morning testosterone peak. They reach for their phone immediately, flooding the brain with stimulation and stress before the hormonal systems have properly activated. They skip food or eat something that spikes insulin and crashes blood sugar within an hour. They skip sunlight entirely, staying indoors under artificial light, which fails to anchor their circadian rhythm. They drink coffee immediately upon waking, before their cortisol has peaked naturally, and blunt the very hormonal response that was supposed to give them their morning energy. Every one of these behaviors works against the biology of the morning. And the energy collapse that follows is not a coincidence. It is a predictable hormonal consequence. Now, the 5 habits that change all of this. Let's go through each one completely. The first morning habit is delaying caffeine by 90 minutes after waking. This is the habit that sounds the most counterintuitive, and the one that produces the most immediate, noticeable difference in all-day energy for men who implement it. Here is the biology. When you wake up, adenosine, the chemical that builds up in the brain during waking hours and drives the feeling of sleepiness, has been clearing from your system during sleep. But in the first 90 minutes after waking, residual adenosine is still present. Caffeine works by blocking adenosine receptors. It does not eliminate adenosine, it simply prevents you from feeling it. When you drink coffee immediately upon waking, you are blocking adenosine receptors that are already partially clearing on their own. And when the caffeine wears off several hours later, the adenosine that was blocked crashes back onto its receptors simultaneously, producing the midday energy crash that men have come to accept as inevitable. By waiting 90 minutes, allowing your cortisol awakening response to complete naturally and your adenosine to clear on its own. And then introducing caffeine, you are using it at the moment it produces the greatest effect with the least rebound. The result is sustained, stable energy through the late morning and afternoon, with a significantly reduced crash. The benefit of this single habit change is a measurable improvement in afternoon energy for the vast majority of men who implement it consistently. The side effect to be aware of is that the transition period, the first week of delaying caffeine, can feel genuinely difficult for men who are accustomed to immediate morning coffee. Mild headaches and sluggishness in the first 30 to 60 minutes after waking are common during the adjustment period as the body recalibrates. To prevent this, the transition should be gradual. Delay your first coffee by 15 minutes each day over the course of a week, rather than jumping immediately to a 90-minute delay. Drink water upon waking during this window to support hydration and mild alertness. Within 7 to 10 days, the adjustment is complete and the benefits become clearly felt. Men with adrenal fatigue or HPA axis dysfunction should be particularly mindful of their caffeine timing, as their cortisol awakening response is already blunted and needs the full natural window to express without caffeine interference. The second morning habit is immediate sunlight exposure within the first 30 minutes of waking. This is the most underestimated tool for all-day energy available to men, and it is completely free. Here's what is happening when morning sunlight enters your eyes. The retinal cells in your eyes contain specialized photoreceptors, called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, that send a direct signal to the suprachiasmatic nucleus in your hypothalamus, the master clock of your circadian rhythm. Morning sunlight, specifically the low-angle blue spectrum light of early morning, sends the clearest possible signal that it is the beginning of the day. This signal sets your circadian clock with precision, triggering a cascade of timed hormonal events. The cortisol awakening response is amplified and sharpened. Serotonin production is stimulated in the brain, providing the neurochemical foundation for mood and motivation throughout the day. And the timing of your melatonin production that evening is set, which means your sleep that night will be deeper, your overnight testosterone production will be more robust, and tomorrow morning's energy will be even better than today's. The side effect concern here is minimal, but cloudy or overcast days reduce the potency of the light signal. And men who live in northern latitudes during winter may need to supplement with a bright light therapy lamp of 10,000 lux to replicate the circadian anchoring effect when outdoor sunlight is insufficient. Do not wear sunglasses during this morning light exposure. The light needs to reach the retinal photoreceptors directly to produce the full hormonal effect. Men with photosensitive eye conditions should consult their eye care professional before implementing extended morning light exposure. The third morning habit, the one I promised would surprise you, is a cold exposure practice in the morning shower. Before you dismiss this one, stay with me for the biology. Because what cold water does to your morning hormonal state goes far deeper than most people realize. When cold water, particularly below 60 degrees Fahrenheit, contacts your skin, your cold shock receptors fire simultaneously, triggering an immediate sympathetic nervous system response. Norepinephrine, one of the primary neurotransmitters governing alertness, focus, and motivation, surges by up to 300% above baseline. Research published in the European Journal of Applied Physiology documented this norepinephrine response in detail, establishing cold water exposure as one of the most reliable and potent natural triggers of this energizing neurochemical available to men. Simultaneously, dopamine, the neurotransmitter most associated with drive, motivation, and reward, increases by up to 250% and remains elevated for several hours after the cold exposure ends. These are not small, subtle shifts. These are significant neurochemical events that directly produce the mental sharpness, physical alertness, and motivated energy that men are trying to manufacture with multiple cups of coffee. The side effect to manage here is the cortisol spike that acute cold exposure triggers, which in the context of a morning routine that also includes the natural cortisol awakening response, can stack cortisol uncomfortably high if the cold exposure is too prolonged or too aggressive. The prevention is straightforward. Contrast therapy, finishing a normal hot shower with 60 to 90 seconds of the coldest water available, produces the norepinephrine and dopamine benefits without the excessive cortisol burden of prolonged cold immersion. Start with 20 to 30 seconds of cold at the end of your shower and build to 60 to 90 seconds over 2 weeks. Men with cardiovascular conditions, hypertension, or Raynaud's disease should consult their physician before implementing cold water exposure, as the acute cardiovascular response to cold shock requires a healthy cardiovascular system to be managed safely. The fourth morning habit is a testosterone-supportive breakfast, consumed within the first 60 to 90 minutes of waking. Most men either skip breakfast entirely or start their day with something that spikes insulin rapidly and leaves them hormonally depleted within 2 hours. Both approaches squander the morning testosterone peak and set up the energy crash that follows. Here is what your breakfast needs to accomplish hormonally. It needs to provide cholesterol and saturated fat as raw material for testosterone synthesis. It needs to provide high-quality complete protein to support muscle protein synthesis and blunt the cortisol awakening response from becoming excessively catabolic. And it needs to do this without a rapid insulin spike that suppresses testosterone activity and drives the blood sugar crash that collapses energy mid-morning. The ideal testosterone-supportive breakfast is built around whole eggs, 2 to 4, cooked in grass-fed butter with the yolk intact, paired with half an avocado for monounsaturated fat and potassium, a handful of leafy greens for DIM and fiber, and optionally some smoked salmon or leftover protein from the previous day. This meal provides cholesterol, saturated fat, monounsaturated fat, zinc, vitamin D, selenium, complete protein, and fiber. Essentially every hormonal raw material and support nutrient that testosterone production and energy metabolism require, in one plate. The side effect concern here applies specifically to men with type 2 diabetes or insulin resistance, for whom dietary cholesterol and saturated fat require more individualized management. For these men, the prevention is working with a physician to determine appropriate egg and fat intake in the context of their metabolic condition, not eliminating the testosterone-supportive nutrients entirely, but calibrating the quantities to their specific metabolic situation. Men who are intermittent fasting and have a delayed eating window should ensure that when their eating window opens, this type of testosterone-supportive meal is their first food, not a carbohydrate-heavy option that undermines the hormonal benefits of the fast. The fifth morning habit is intentional movement, specifically 10 to 20 minutes of physical activity within the first 90 minutes of waking. Not a full workout, not an exhausting, hour-long training session that spikes cortisol excessively in the morning. Intentional movement. A brisk walk, a set of bodyweight exercises, light resistance training, or mobility work. Here is why this matters hormonally. Morning physical activity, even at low to moderate intensity, amplifies the testosterone peak of the morning by stimulating additional LH release from the pituitary. It activates the muscle pump, improving circulation and oxygen delivery throughout the body. It elevates body temperature, which sharpens cognitive function and physical readiness. And it triggers BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a neurochemical that supports memory, focus, and cognitive performance for hours after the movement ends. Research published in the journal Medicine and Science in Sports and Exercise found that men who exercised in the morning showed significantly higher testosterone levels throughout the morning hours compared to sedentary mornings, even when the exercise was relatively brief. A 15-minute brisk walk produces measurable hormonal and cognitive benefits that a 15-minute session of social media scrolling in bed does not. The morning movement does not need to be dramatic. It needs to be consistent. The side effect concern is overtraining in the morning. Men who turn this 15-minute movement habit into an exhausting 90-minute session before breakfast risk spiking cortisol excessively, depleting energy reserves early, and impairing testosterone through the catabolic hormonal environment of fasted heavy training. The prevention is clear: keep morning movement brief, moderate, and enjoyable. Save the heavy resistance training sessions for later in the day, ideally early afternoon, when cortisol is naturally lower and testosterone is still meaningfully elevated. And use the morning movement as an activating, hormonal priming practice rather than a performance training session. Now let's talk about who needs to approach certain elements of this morning protocol with additional care. Men dealing with adrenal fatigue or chronically dysregulated cortisol need to be particularly thoughtful about cold exposure and aggressive morning movement, both of which add additional cortisol load to a system that is already under adrenal stress. For these men, the morning protocol should prioritize gentle movement, morning sunlight, and a nourishing breakfast, while cold exposure is introduced very gradually and only once adrenal function has stabilized. Men who work night shifts or have significantly disrupted circadian rhythms face the challenge that their hormonal morning, their cortisol awakening response, and testosterone peak does not align with conventional morning hours. For these men, the protocol should be applied relative to their individual waking time, not to the clock. What matters is the sequence of behaviors in the first 90 minutes after waking, regardless of whether that waking happens at 6 a.m. or 2 p.m. Men in high-stress periods, intense work deadlines, significant life pressures, major transitions, should be mindful that the cold exposure and movement habits add biological stress to an already elevated stress load. Prioritizing sleep and the breakfast habit during these periods, and moderating the intensity of cold exposure and movement, protects hormonal health without abandoning the protocol entirely. Here is the complete morning protocol, your step-by-step guide from the moment your eyes open. Upon waking, drink a large glass of water immediately. 16 ounces minimum. Overnight dehydration reduces blood volume, impairs circulation, and creates a mild cognitive fog that is often mistaken for grogginess. Rehydrating first thing is the single simplest energy intervention available. Within the first 10 minutes, get outside or near a bright window for 5 to 10 minutes of morning light exposure. No sunglasses. Let the light anchor your circadian clock and amplify your cortisol awakening response. Within the first 30 minutes, do your 10 to 20 minutes of intentional movement. A brisk walk outside doubles as both movement and sunlight exposure, the most efficient combination in the morning protocol. Within the first 60 to 90 minutes, eat your testosterone-supportive breakfast. Whole eggs and butter, avocado, greens, optionally fatty fish. No white toast, no sugary cereal, no pastry. This is the hormonal foundation of your day. At the 90-minute mark, now you have your coffee. Not before. Now the caffeine lands on a nervous system that has naturally activated through cortisol, sunlight, movement, and food. And it amplifies that activation cleanly without the rebound crash. End your morning shower with 60 to 90 seconds of cold water. Feel the norepinephrine surge. Feel the dopamine rise. Step out of that shower knowing that your brain chemistry has just been optimized for the hours ahead. That is your morning. Consistent, sequential, biologically aligned. The entire protocol from wake up to coffee takes approximately 90 minutes. And the return on that investment is energy that does not collapse at noon, mental sharpness that carries through the afternoon, and a hormonal foundation that compounds in your favor every single day you practice it. Your morning does not just set the tone for your day, it sets the hormonal trajectory for your health. Men like you, who understand the biology behind their morning, who work with their cortisol rhythm instead of against it, who feed their testosterone peak instead of suppressing it, who anchor their circadian clock instead of ignoring it, Those men do not drag themselves through their days. They lead them, they perform in them, they feel like themselves in them. 5 habits, 90 minutes. A completely different day, every day. If this video gave you a morning protocol, you are going to implement starting tomorrow. If you are going to delay your caffeine, get outside for sunlight, end your shower cold, eat the whole eggs, and move before you sit. Please hit that like button right now and subscribe to Men's Vitality Hub. Every week, this is exactly what we bring you. Real biology, honest guidance, practical protocols for men who are done accepting exhaustion as their default state. And tell me in the comments, which of these 5 habits are you already doing, and which one are you going to add first? Drop your answer below. Because your commitment, stated publicly, is one of the most powerful predictors of whether you actually follow through. And your answer might inspire another man in this community to make the same decision. Thank you for watching. Own your morning. I will see you in the next one.